All right, so we're back and ready to dive into this Monica Lewinsky thing.
Yeah, should be interesting.
You gave us some really great sources to work with.
Yeah.
I'm especially interested in the stuff before she even got to the White House, you know?
It's pretty wild, right?
Like all that stuff with her drama teacher, Andy Blur, remember that?
Oh, yeah.
That seems like an important piece of the puzzle.
It's definitely setting the stage for everything that comes later.
Yeah, totally. So the podcast we're using kind of paints this picture of Monica in LA.
Yeah.
Like before all this White House stuff, she's just kind of figuring things out.
Just a normal young person, right?
Yeah. Going to community college, living in Beverly Hills.
Oh, wow. Tough life.
But also, like, the podcast mentions she was struggling with her weight, not really fitting in. Like,
Yeah.
a lot of people at that age, you know?
Yeah, for sure.
And then she meets this guy, Andy Blur.
Older guy, right?
Yeah, 7 years older, a drama teacher. So, like,
Charismatic, probably.
yeah, the podcast just makes him sound pretty intense.
Oh.
And their relationship, it got complicated.
Complicated how?
Well, for starters, he was married
Oh, wow.
with a kid on the way, too.
That's a mess.
And, you know, we were talking about that article you sent, the one about relationships and validation.
Yeah,
I kept thinking about that as I was listening to the podcast.
I can see why.
Because it makes you wonder, right, about how that early experience with Blur
Right.
might have influenced her later choices.
Oh, interesting.
Like maybe seeking out those unavailable men, you know?
Could be a pattern there.
Totally. But anyway, so Monica, she obviously wanted a fresh start.
Who wouldn't?
So she moves to Portland, goes to college.
Smart move.
Yeah, and like really dives into her studies, discovers this passion for psychology.
You know, you sent me that little excerpt from one of her college papers.
Oh, yeah, the one about self-identity.
That was pretty cool.
I know, right? It was like this little window into her mind at that time.
Totally.
And for a while, it seems like things are going well for her.
Yeah, getting away from all that drama.
Exactly. Like she's finally breaking free from the past and like finding her own way.
A new chapter, right?
Totally. And then boom, Blur shows up in Portland.
Oh, no, really?
Yeah. Talk about a curveball.
Like can't escape the past kind of thing.
Exactly. And it's like she can't quite shake those complicated relationships.
That's where her mom comes in, right?
Marcia.
Yeah.
Yeah, she gets involved big time.
Detective mom.
Totally. She was worried sick about Monica and Bullock.
Understandably so.
And she's like, we got to get you out of this situation. And that's when she comes up with the White House internship idea.
The White House.
Yep. A way to get Monica away from Blur, you know, give her some new experiences.
I see. A fresh start.
Exactly. But what's interesting is that Monica wasn't exactly a politics junkie.
Really?
No, she seemed way more into psychology, figuring out her own path, you know?
So was this internship really her idea then?
That's a good question. Like, was it more about her mom's ambitions for her?
It makes you wonder about family expectations and how they shape our choices.
Right. But either way, DC had a huge impact on Monica, that's for sure.
Oh, absolutely.
Like being in the West Wing, all that power swirling around.
It's intoxicating, isn't it?
Totally. And then, of course, there's Clinton himself.
Right, the elephant in the room.
You know, it's funny, she didn't even describe him as being, like, traditionally handsome.
Really?
Yeah. But she talked about his charisma, this, like, raw sexual energy he had.
Oh, I see.
Like, he just commanded attention.
Yeah, I get that.
And then there's that birthday party, remember?
Right.
On the South Lawn.
Oh, yeah.
Monica was all dressed up, trying to get his attention.
I bet.
She even did like a little Marilyn Monroe impression.
No way, really?
Yeah, the podcast describes it pretty vividly.
So did it work? Did she get his attention?
Oh, yeah. But it gets even more interesting.
Oh.
The podcast mentions Clinton, like, brushing his hand against her breast.
Whoa, what?
And Monica, well, she totally interpreted that as intentional.
As a sign of interest, right?
Exactly. And I think
Yeah.
that's kind of a turning point.
I can see.
Because before it was just about being near power, you know?
Yeah.
But suddenly it becomes about this possibility of a personal connection.
With the president of the United States.
Exactly. Like, imagine the allure of that.
It's heady stuff.
Totally. And what's crazy is that she knew the risks.
Oh, come on.
Seriously, like, she wasn't naive about the situation.
But she went for it anyway.
Yeah. She chose to ignore those risks and pursue that connection.
Wow. That's a bold move.
It really makes you think about the power of attraction, you know?
Yeah, and how sometimes we just throw caution to the wind.
Totally. And all this happens before the government shutdown,
Oh, right.
which is like throws everything into even more chaos.
Didn't forget about that.
It's like a whole other layer to this crazy story.
So where do we go from here? What happens next?
Well, that's where things get really wild.
I can't wait.
We'll dive into that in the next part of our deep dive.
All right. Sounds good.
Yeah.
You know, it's funny. When you think about it, the government shutdown kind of help things along in a weird way.
Right. It's like this big political drama going on outside.
And inside the White House,
Yeah, inside it's creating this like bubble for Monica and Clinton.
a bubble of opportunity,
So
maybe.
totally. Most of the staff is gone, so they're suddenly spending way more time together.
Like all those late night phone calls, the secret meetings.
Oh, yeah, the podcast mentions that.
Definitely a step up from that brush of the hand at the party.
And the gifts, too.
The gifts. Oh, yeah, I remember reading about that.
You sent over that article, remember, about gift giving in relationships.
Yeah, how it can solidify a connection.
Exactly. And it's like, in this case, it's adding this whole other layer of inappropriateness.
No kidding.
Uh,
But it also shows how entangled they're becoming emotionally.
Right, even though it's so clearly not a healthy situation.
Yeah, I mean, she was 22.
He was the president, for crying out loud.
And like in his late 40s, right?
Yeah, something like that.
Definitely a major power imbalance.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
I mean, can you really even call it a consensual relationship when it's like that?
You know, you sent that legal analysis.
Oh, right.
It was really interesting.
It really delves into that whole question of consent, doesn't it?
Yeah, and like how power dynamics can completely cloud judgment.
Absolutely. Like one person might feel pressured, obligated even.
Even if they have mixed feelings.
Exactly. And it's clear that Monica was infatuated with Clinton.
Oh, totally.
But she was also looking for validation,
To feel important, desirable.
especially after everything with Bloor.
It's like she was seeking something that Clinton in his position could offer.
Right. That sense of power and importance.
And that's where Linda Tripp comes in, right?
Oh, Linda Tripp. Yeah.
Talk about a game changer.
I mean, those tapes. Wow.
She was like a coworker, right?
Yeah, Monica starts confiding in her about the relationship.
And Tripp's secretly recording everything.
Can you imagine someone doing that at your work?
It's kind of creepy when you think about it.
It's like, who can you trust?
Seriously.
Yeah.
But anyway, those tapes, they become like the smoking gun
Yeah, the evidence that kicks off the whole investigation.
and eventually leads to Clinton's impeachment
It's crazy how it all started with a personal betrayal.
and ended up having these massive political ramifications,
Absolutely. It created this whole climate of paranoia and distrust.
especially in the White House.
And Clinton's already under fire from his opponents.
Right, he's trying to fight them off.
And then he's forced to deny the affair under oath.
Oh, man. I remember watching that on TV.
It was surreal.
It was like, is this really happening?
A defining moment for sure.
And then it just explodes.
The media goes crazy.
Oh, totally. It was like a feeding frenzy.
Cable news was going nonstop.
Partisan battles everywhere you looked.
Yeah. And all the while,
Monica's caught in the middle,
she became the scapegoat.
publicly humiliated.
It was brutal.
Do you remember where you were when you first heard about it?
Oh, yeah. I was in college.
It was everywhere, right?
Yeah, you could escape it.
And reading that article she wrote years later, wow.
Heartbreaking.
She talks about being shamed, vilified.
It's like a reminder of the human cost of all this.
Right. Sometimes we get so caught up in the political drama.
We forget about the real people involved.
It makes you think, doesn't it?
It does. It really does.
It's crazy to think how this whole thing kind of changed the media landscape too, right?
Oh, for sure. Like the 24/7 news cycle. Do you think this helped kickstart that?
Maybe. I mean, it was one of the first big scandals to play out with the internet and cable news going nonstop.
Yeah, true. It was like the perfect storm.
And it definitely feels like it fueled that whole partisan divide,
Oh, absolutely. Like us versus them.
Yeah, exactly. Which hasn't really gone away, has it?
Sadly not. It seems like it just keeps getting worse.
But let's talk about Monica. After everything that happened,
Yeah.
you sent that article about her work as an anti-bullying advocate.
It's pretty incredible, isn't it?
I know, talk about turning a negative into a positive.
It's like she went from being this figure of ridicule to this powerful voice.
For people who have been shamed and silenced,
And especially online, that's where it gets really brutal.
it really struck me reading her story, like her resilience.
To go through all that and then come out advocating for others, it's amazing.
It takes a lot of strength, that's for sure.
And it kind of spoke to conversation about power dynamics too, right?
Oh, totally, like consent of authority.
Yeah. The whole thing forced us to look at how women are treated in these situations.
Compared to men, like the double standard is so obvious.
And I think the Lewinsky scandal, along with movements like Me Too, really shifted things.
Yeah, we're definitely more aware of these issues now.
But there's always more work to do, right?
For sure, it's an ongoing conversation.
And this whole scandal, it's a reminder that these things can happen anywhere.
Yeah, like power can be so easily abused.
And we got to be careful about rushing to judgment.
Always get the full story, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So where does this leave us? What are the big takeaways from this whole deep dive?
Well, I think it shows how dangerous unchecked power can be.
Absolutely, and how important it is to hold people accountable.
No matter who they are, right?
Exactly. And this wasn't just a private affair. It impacted everyone.
Yeah, like the whole country was caught up in it.
And it really makes you think about how we consume information.
And how quick we are to judge.
We need more empathy, more understanding.
Totally. So it's a complex story, right?
Oh, absolutely.
With layers and layers.
But it's a human story, too.
About ambition and betrayal.
Connection, validation.
Yeah, all these things we can all relate to on some level.
And it makes you wonder, how would we view this today?
With social media and everything.
Would it be different? Would we judge them differently?
It's a good question to think about.
Definitely makes you appreciate how much the world has changed.
So much to unpack. It's fascinating, isn't it?
It really is.
Well, thanks for taking this deep dive with us, exploring this crazy chapter in American history.
Yeah, it's been great.
And hey, keep those questions coming, folks.
Yeah, we love diving into these stories with you.
We'll be back next time with another one.
Always something interesting to explore.
Until then, keep thinking, keep questioning.
And thanks for listening.